Okay, BookTube. Since my last video where I made a plea for my future and everyone just laughed at me, um, I decided I won't do that anymore. But instead, what I'm going to do is talk about the Foundation series because I finally finished it. Now, I was correct in my assumption that Prelude to Foundation and Forward the Foundation were both about Harry Selden, so that was really cool. But what I will say is that I don't know what it is about Asimov, but the second book in a chunk seems to be hard for him to write, it feels like. Foundation and Empire, the middle book of the trilogy, felt a little flat to me, which is weird because typically the middle book of a trilogy is usually off the chain. And then Foundation's Edge was really good, and Foundation and Earth wasn't as good. And the same thing happened in the prequels. Prelude to Foundation was really good, and Forward the Foundation was not. I don't know. I feel like I do have a couple questions. Like, my first question is, other than the fact that the second Foundation saying that no one would want to follow an all-knowing leadership kind of thing. Other than that, I don't really know why the first Foundation was constantly at war with the second Foundation. I don't get it. Like, if everyone is on board for the Selden Plan, why wouldn't anyone from the first Foundation want to be a part of the second Foundation? Not like be a part of it, but work together. Like that whole thing just didn't make any sense to me. So that was a bit trying. And on the podcast, I talked about how I felt like the last book, Foundation and Earth, might have been ghost written by somebody else. And it was the last book he was writing before he died. So I could almost see that that's actually a thing that happened. For those of you who don't know why I thought that, the character Travis in Foundation's Edge was awesome, and then his character in Foundation and Earth was kind of a bitch and kind of whiny and kind of just awful. Another neat thing, I think, about Foundation and Earth was this is what, like 86 ish. So the AIDS epidemic was like a really big deal at the time. And Travis gets a sexually transmitted virus that is going to kill him in one point in the story. And I thought that was like a very on the nose kind of look at society, I guess. But yeah, so I don't understand the constant battle between the two foundations. I don't think Harry would have made the two foundations if he would have known that they would constantly be battling the whole time. But then if he didn't know they would constantly be battling all the time, does that mean the Selden Plan in and of itself was completely flawed from the beginning? So that's a whole other bag of worms. I don't know. Like, I really enjoyed most of it. Um, there were a couple things that were confusing, I guess. I mean, I've spoiled a bunch of this already, but at the end of, I don't even remember what book it was anymore. I guess it would be the end of Second Foundation, or is it the end of Foundation's Edge? I don't know. In one of those, you find out where the Second Foundation is. But at the end of Forward the Foundation, it doesn't seem like that's where the Second Foundation is. It seems like Selden had a completely different place for where the Second Foundation would be, which then throws a wrench into everything almost, because then it seems like there is another Second Foundation, or the Second Foundation was somewhere and then had to go to this place where they ended up being. So with that said, Star's End could have multiple locations. I don't know. And Forward the Foundation was just sad. It was just like fucking awful. Like, for the majority of these books, because so much time passes between books, characters you love are dead, but it's because it's been like 50 years since the last bit of the story, so it makes sense that they're dead. But in this, like, characters keep dying, and he keeps bringing up the fact that characters are dying, and characters that are older or younger than him are dying. Actually, I'm wrong on that thing I said earlier about Foundation and Earth being the last book he wrote, because he obviously had to write these two prequels. So that's a wrong statement that I change. So before you start throwing comments down there about how fucking stupid I am, I fixed it. And so, like, I'm assuming a lot of this had to do with Asimov's, like, last days kind of thing. But man, what a fucking depressing book. And then, like, it ends with a letter, and the last book that ended with a letter I read was Brewsters Millions, and I didn't really like that either, or that ending. So I don't know, like, the Foundation series is really cool. I feel like there's giant fucking plot holes in it, and the only thing that I could say about it is that because a lot of these stories were written for pulps, like, without the idea of them being collected, maybe, that things were put into motion that would be weird to change continuity wise in the Foundation series. But there are other Foundation short stories and robot series stories and galactic stories that have already done that. So I don't even know if that's a worthy excuse. But there is a second trilogy and some short stories, and I think I'm going to dive into those next, or I may start with the robot series, because I've read bits of that, but I never thought that it was like a whole thing. Like, like I didn't know iRobot was like a chunk of a giant thing. And I didn't even know that like Pebble in the Sky was a part of a series. So I'm gonna have to figure all this shit out. So I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with Asimov, but I'm curious to continue. So let me know down below if you have any answers to any of these questions I have. If you've read the second trilogy, or what is it, Friends of Foundation? It's like a collection. Let me know if you've read any of these, and if some of them are worth reading and some of them are just junk. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if anyone wants to read any of these with me, also let me know. So I will talk to you soon, guys.